Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Journeys with Jack. Today I'm going to speak about Scotland. Thanks for tuning in. So, I had the pleasure of going over to Scotland a few years back, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. This is Western Scotland that we're going to focus on today. Scotland is rather sparsely populated outside of the major cities of Glasgow and, to a lesser degree, Edinburgh. Scotland's about the size of South Carolina, but is very long and narrow, so over 275 miles in width. So my wife Eleanor and I had gotten on British Airways, flew from Atlanta over to Gatwick, and then on up to Inverness. Now here's the first tip for you guys. British Airways was great, and they served an authentic Scottish breakfast on the way from Gatwick over to Inverness. So I had the typical heavy, hearty breakfast of beans, bacon, sausage, etc., with some black pudding and some tomato and mushroom. Well, we were fueled up, but as we landed, my heart sank a little bit after we collected our baggage in Inverness and went to get the rental car. Lo and behold, there was a couple of rental car offices there at the airport, but not the company that I had used. So we had to take a taxi down to the town of Inverness to find the rental car company, and then we got our Vauxhall Corsa. I went by the Bank of Scotland and changed money. And so here's two lessons. Number one, make sure that whoever you're renting the rental car from has the office at the airport. It's going to save you some time and effort. Also, nowadays, I make an exchange of my money before I go overseas. Pretty good deal at Synovus Bank. $15 to exchange the money. You get a good exchange rate, and it's $15 no matter how much. So whether you exchange $100 or $1,000, same price. Naturally, you're better off changing a couple of thousand or so. It's what I do nowadays. So we set out and went to first the battlefield of Culloden, scene of the major engagement from the rebellion of 1745, where unfortunately for hopes of Scottish independence, Bonnie Prince Charles Stuart was defeated by the forces arrayed against him of English and some Scottish allies. He had Scottish, Irish, and French on his side, and there's a big memorial at the cairn at Culloden to these that died in that battle, the Scots, Irish, and French, trying to attain the independence of Scotland again. It was a very cold, blustery, and wet day that we were there. It seemed fitting as we went to the place where the hopes for Scottish independence with the 1745 rebellion died out. Subsequently, we started driving down the A82 along Loch Ness. No monster sighting, unfortunately. We arrived in the town of Drumnadrochit and routed around to find a bed and breakfast. We settled on the Kilmore House. Nowadays, I'm not quite as bold as just to set out on a trip without lodging. Back then I was, but we'd gone during the month of March, so less crowded, easy to spontaneously pick up a lodging place. I've got a friend of mine who likes to do that all the time. He tells me about great adventures he's had in finding unexpected things. So if you got the air of adventure, perhaps you try it too. Anyway, great bed and breakfast, and they recommended a good restaurant which we went to called the Fiddlers and had a delicious salmon. I was so pleased with it, and then afterwards we had a pint over at a local pub called the Lewiston Arms. So this area around Loch Ness, Drumnadrochit and Lewiston are close by towns, and then Castle Urquhart is nearby, and the general area people refer to as the Glen Urquhart area. So the next morning, being Sunday, we were going to go to church but had a little bit of time, thought we'd visit Castle Urquhart first. Well, perhaps we stayed a little too long, because as we made our way over to the Presbyterian church, I wound up opening a door that I thought would lead me into the church, and lo and behold, I was looking at the back of the minister as he stood in the pulpit, and all the people in the pews were looking forward at us. I quickly shut the door. As we made our way around to the other side, everyone, it seemed, met us with a greeting and a prayer book and a Bible. I guess it was maybe not everybody, but it sure seemed like it. Well, the church service was grand, and I have to confess, to this day it stands out to me, the children's sermon. the minister was speaking to the children and telling them about the changes they go through over the years and how some of them used to be 1 stone in weight and were now 5 stone, etc. And as children do, they got to talking and cutting up and were a little bit unruly. And the man stopped and he pointed out to them and he said, "It's not just me that's speaking to you. It's the voice of Almighty God." And all the children got very quiet and very attentive suddenly. Well, when church let out, my wife and I went over to the Loch Ness Center nearby. And we didn't do the entire tour, but we were very pleased to see a stall amongst the various gift shops and other commercial proprietorships selling tartans. And so there we got a McLennan tartan, which is my family tartan. Hopefully you can see that. And then I also was able to get back here in the back is some heraldry, and this would be the crest of the McLennan family. They had numerous different Scottish clan tartans and then other surnames as well. So you can also later, if you wish, you can have them embroider something special if they didn't have it right away for you. So they did very good work at this place. I'll speak about it a little bit more in my second Scotland edition. So that was a fantastic opportunity, learned a lot, and then I would like to draw your attention back to this plaque. I find it interesting that my family motto, Dum Spiro Spero, which is while I hope I breathe, is also the family motto of the state of South Carolina. Now the McLennan is a small clan, and we drove on from that stop to the area called Kintail, which is where the McLennans originally hailed from. There is a big mountain range by Scottish standards called the Five Sisters of Kintail. Not nearly as tall as what we have at the Rockies, etc., but impressive nonetheless. Now, unfortunately, we could not find any McLennans in the Kintail area. They'd all meandered further afield. Many came to this country. I had family that immigrated to South Carolina and some even to Barbados. Most McLennans seem to have moved on to Fort William and further south. Perhaps the most famous McLennan, or so is claimed, would be John Lennon of Beatles fame. I realize it's a bit controversial. Some other groups claim him as an ancestor, but theoretically the family dropped the Mac to make it a more of an anglicized name. So there's your story. Well, after going through Kintail, we drove down to the land side a little bit further, the Isle of Skye, to the Kyle of Lochash, and checked in for the night at a bed and breakfast called the Old Bank House. Now, apparently they recycle a lot of buildings there because there's a bed and breakfast called the Old Post Office as well. Anyhow, pretty cool place. We enjoyed our stay there. Nice proprietors. We dropped our bags and had a little bit of time to go see Eileen Donnan Castle, which is the clan seat of the McRae family. This castle, very famous actually. I just want to flip over and make sure I gave you the proper reference. This castle was used in the James Bond movie, The World Is Not Enough. Also, it was in the original Highlander movie that starred Sean Connery. Beautiful place on an island in Loch Druick. So there's kind of a, maybe there's a peninsula, I guess would be the best way to say it, or maybe a causeway that goes out to this island. Causeway is probably a more proper term. Anyway, this is right off of the down the A82, easy access, and we took that road from Inverness all the way down there to Kyle of Lochash. So after seeing the Castle Eileen Donnan, we turned in next morning, got up, went across the toll bridge onto the Isle of Skye, and went over to the island of St. Columba in the Snizort River near Ski Boost Bridge. Now, this is a very marshy, wet island, so be forewarned, and it was cold that time of year in March. This island has just a fascinating ethereal type cemetery. They have graves going way back. In fact, 2 of the Crusader knights at least are buried on this island, maybe more. I saw 2 of these graves. Perhaps they were Knights Templar, I don't know. Fascinating. The clan Nicholson and McNichol has over 24 of the clan chiefs buried on this island. We spent quite a lot of time walking around this Isle of St. Columba. And if you recall, perhaps from previous podcast where I referenced St. Columba in the context of Dublin, Ireland, and his missionary efforts on the island of Iona in Scotland. But St. Columba traveled far and wide in the land of Scotland, originally hailing from Ireland. Missionary he was. So subsequent to viewing that site, we went to Dunvegan Castle, which was fascinating. That is the home of the MacLeod clan since about the 13th century. In fact, there's an interesting document conferring some type of royal title and ownership to the MacLeod clan from James IV of Scotland. He was a progenitor of James VI, who became James I of England, the man who authorized the King James Bible. We'll speak about him at a subsequent podcast. So this castle, fascinating, particularly in that it is in such good condition and is still inhabited. There was a plaque in the castle that mentioned that part of the castle was built into the quotation mark living rock. So that would refer to rock that had not been quarried or cast or cut with a stone. And so you could see how there was this rock outcropping near the castle, and they built the castle into it, partially, I suppose, as a ready means of defense and using available materials. Other thing about the castle that stood out to me were the grounds. There was a tree that looked a bit like, I guess, leaves like an avocado tree. It didn't have any fruit on it, but it had serial limbs coming out, maybe like a white pine one would encounter in North Carolina if you're familiar with such tree. Anyway, I was fascinated by it. I even drew a picture of it in my journal. So subsequently, we finished up on Isle of Skye, came back across the toll bridge, got on the A82 and went down to Fort William, where we checked into a bed and breakfast. All told, we covered a lot of mileage from starting in Inverness to get down to Fort William, which Fort William leads into the Scottish lowlands. So we covered a bunch of the highlands and drove through a lot of area with very high, tall, craggy mountains and purplish, pink, green heather along the way. Beautiful scenery, really captivating. We reached Fort William around dark and checked into our bed and breakfast and went over to the Ben Nevis pub to have a delicious dinner of lamb casserole and vegetable soup. Ben Nevis is the tallest mountain in Scotland, so hence the pub was named for it. So that was our first foray through the Western Highlands, and I'm going to speak on another episode about Fort William onward to the border of England and into the Lake District. So I hope you'll tune in for that one as well. Thanks very much, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope you got some good ideas and tips. Please look behind me at the Scottish Saltire flag and the Scottish Rampart lion on the bookshelf. Bye-bye.